While Russian planes and drones won't leave Ukraine in peace, we've now spotted aerial spies from Hungary. And why do Russian saboteurs wear Ukrainian pixel camouflage? All this and more in today's news roundup on the Dempli Sudan channel, new content in the United Marathon, and all the most relevant updates on day 1311 of the war, right now on TSN. The enemy is seeping through at the front. According to analysts from the Deep State portal, there are now so many Russians in the city that their presence has been recorded in the central part, and they are approaching the Yuvileny district. In Kupiansk, Russian saboteurs initially entered in small groups via the gas pipeline, but later the defense forces blew it up. So now the enemy is sneaking in across the Oskil River and through the forest. Once inside Kupiansk itself, they change into either civilian clothes or even the pixelated camouflage of the Ukrainian army. And this is exactly what makes the defense of the city so difficult for our troops. Although drones and mortars have already been brought in to support the infantry on the outskirts, and they are also defending the settlement, meanwhile, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has recorded more than 106 combat clashes along the entire front line since the beginning of the day. The hottest direction is Pokrovsk, where they counted more than 30 enemy assaults. At the same time, the Russians have now abandoned their offensive on the Dnipropetrovsk region, as stated by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Oleksandr Syrsky. Motorcycles, tanks, and of course infantry, Ukrainian pilots and kamikaze drones skillfully destroy all of these. Due to the large number of enemy infantry and assaults, drone operators are constantly on combat duty. When the enemy advances, sometimes several dozen drones are deployed by a single crew just to stop the movement of enemy equipment. The guys need as many drones as possible, so they've launched a fundraiser. You'll see the QR code on the screen, and donating will only take you a few seconds. And now, a report on the work of combat crews from TCH correspondent Ruslan Yermolyuk.
This is a canister bomb, this is a shrapnel charge. These four and the shrapnel charge. That's it, they're for use against enemy infantry.
Gogol is loading the drone with explosives. Everything is prepared according to the mission.
The shape charge is for vehicles, the shrapnel charge is for infantry. Shrapnel for infantry, shape charge for vehicles and motorcycles.
It's a cold September morning. It seems like the fields and tree lines are asleep, but not the enemy.
An enemy vehicle has been spotted. We're flying out to finish the job, to destroy that vehicle.
For these guys, the day starts early, with a search for occupiers who have been spotted in the tree line.
We say flight, you feel it, the adrenaline, the responsibility. When you're a pilot, you're responsible for the work of the entire crew. And of course, there's that adrenaline too.
Zakhar is flying out to search for the enemy vehicle. Before the war, the guys from the 27th had nothing to do with the army. Their job is combat duty, 24/7. The enemy has become more active in the Orikhiv direction and is constantly trying to move closer to our positions.
We took off more than 70 times in 24 hours. These were active actions, mechanized assaults by the enemy in our direction. This is the enemy's manpower, their logistics, and the destruction of enemy pilots.
The most desired target is enemy pilots. The more of them we destroy, the less our infantry and logistics will suffer. Because of the effectiveness of our pilots, the enemy is furious as they keep losing everything. Every day they drop aerial bombs and dozens of kamikaze drones on the tree lines. Most of the time the drone operators have to spend their time underground, because their positions must remain hidden and secret, because there are so many enemy drones in the air, and the enemy has deployed new units that actively hunt for our pilots and throw everything they have at them, from FPV drones to heavy artillery, to destroy them. In this sector of the front, the enemy is using powerful electronic warfare systems. They jam the signals of our drones, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to fight against them.
There are a great many electronic warfare systems in operation. Lately it has become really quite difficult to effectively fly drones at all, primarily because they can cut off the video feed and completely take away control, so we constantly endeavor to upgrade our systems.
This is what a curtain looks like. This happens when enemy electronic warfare takes away our video feed and we lose control. And today, our pilots will have to get around such curtains in order to find and strike the target.
Thunder, we have mini jammers that are installed right in the armor. Each has their own needs, their own control panel, their own payment. But the armored vehicles come already equipped.
At dawn, the enemy emerges on the ground under an anti-drone cloak. The pilot turns the drone and in a dive strikes the infantryman.
Right below you, right below you. Got him.
At the base, another drone is already being prepared for takeoff, while one more is in the air searching for an enemy van. This conveyor never stops, not even for a moment, because the lives of our infantry on the ground depend on these young, still very youthful pilots. Ruslana Yermoliuk, Mikhailo Putyata, TSN, 1+1 Marathon United News.
The President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, is verbally attacking Russia, saying that their economy is going to hell, that they've put everything on the line. He made such statements the day before as well, and in the presence of Turkish President Erdogan, he said that the best thing Erdogan could do was simply not buy oil from Russia. More details will be provided by TSN's correspondent in Washington, Olha Koshelenko, whom we already have with us now. Ola, you're on the line. Hello. So Turkey is the third largest buyer of Russian energy resources in the world. And yet, Turkey is a NATO member. Trump previously wrote a letter to the alliance countries, allegedly asking them to stop trading with the Russians. Did Donald Trump have a chance to convince Erdogan personally of this?
Greetings, Saint. The day before, when Donald Trump hosted Erdogan at the White House, he turned the start of the meeting, which Trump usually turns into a mini press conference, into a press conference once again. However, it was mostly Trump who spoke, not Erdogan. Trump showered his guest with compliments. He said that Erdogan is a highly respected leader in the world, that everyone respects him, including Putin, Zelensky, and Trump himself. And supposedly for now in the war he maintains neutrality, but the best thing he could do in the context of the war is to stop buying NATO from Putin. To this, Erdogan did not respond. He continued listening to Trump through the interpreter. And later, when Trump was asked whether he actually managed to convince the leader of Turkey, he said, well, I didn't directly ask him for anything, but if I had, I think he would have complied. Let's listen.
I wouldn't want to talk about it, but if I want to, he'll do it.
But he didn't promise that.
Well, I didn't say, stop, but I believe he'll stop it. Do you know why? Because you can buy it from many other people. He can buy it from many other people.
Trump also spoke with his friend, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Let me remind you that on Tuesday, during negotiations with Volodymyr Zelensky, in fact, Volodymyr Zelensky complained to Trump that Orban does not want to stop trading with Russia. And then Trump said, he's my friend, I'll talk to him. And there's a feeling that he will change his point of view. And so Trump has already spoken with Orban by phone. And not only did he fail to change Orban's point of view, he even changed his own. Now, according to what is apparently Orban's explanation, he clarified that unlike, say, Hungary and Slovakia, they do not have access to the sea, so they have no alternative supply routes. And so they cannot stop trading with Russia. And that's why, in fact, they say this Trump initiative to force countries, as he put it, to stop buying Russian oil products has not made much progress so far, colleague.
As for the rhetoric about Russia, let me repeat it for you once more, in case you had connection issues. Trump does not change his harsh rhetoric. The rhetoric about Russia that we've liked in recent weeks about their economy going down the drain, is there already any reaction to all this, particularly from Moscow? Because it seems to me that until recently they were placing certain hopes on Trump.
The Russian reaction is very interesting. It is cautious and measured. Obviously, they are trying not to anger Trump any further. For example, Putin's special representative, Dmitriev, wrote a post on X where he tried to explain that the Russian economy is actually in full bloom. And Putin's spokesperson, Peskov, responded to Trump's remark that Russia is a paper tiger. In other words, it's only scary when it's drawn in a picture, but in reality, it's not. He just started rambling, saying something like, Russia is actually not a tiger, but a bear. To which, by the way, a NATO Secretary General Rutte noted on Fox News that if you are a real bear, you don't need to explain it further. Similarly, American media outlets recently reported that the Russian government has officially extended its ban on the export of various petroleum products until the very end of the current year, indicating a continued effort to stabilize domestic markets and manage energy resources. This is due to the fact that, according to American media, Ukrainian drones are very effective disabling Russian oil refineries, although Russian officials are obviously trying to explain this with logistical reasons. And the Wall Street Journal writes about the reason for Trump's change in rhetoric, citing their sources. Recently, Trump had very close discussions with his special representative for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, and the current U.S. representative to the United Nations, Michael Waltz. And supposedly it was they who convinced Trump that Russia is actually not winning, that its real gains on the battlefield are very insignificant, that its economy is not collapsing, and that in reality there are huge lines for fuel in Russia. It is stopping its exports to other countries, and as a result, Ukraine is achieving success. And as a result, we really do see a change in Trump's rhetoric, and yesterday he made several rather belligerent statements.
I
am very dissatisfied with what Russia is doing and with what President Putin is doing. I don't like it at all. He is killing people for no reason at all. And things are going frankly badly for them, considering they've put everything on the line. Their economy is going to hell. They're bombing everything indiscriminately and capturing very little territory. If they're capturing anything at all, in fact, they've actually lost some territory. So I think this is very bad for Russia's reputation. This war should have ended. If this were our war, we would have finished it in a week. But they're entering their 4th year. 4 years of fighting.
But at the very same time, we haven't really seen any significant real changes in the actual actions of the Trump administration, at least none that we are currently aware of or have been publicly disclosed. There are neither new sanctions nor any other measures from Trump at the moment. The British Telegraph, for example, writes that during this meeting on Tuesday in New York, which I already mentioned, Volodymyr Zelensky asked Donald Trump to deploy American long-range Tomahawk missiles in Ukraine. Their range is sufficient to strike Moscow. But of course, Ukraine is not telling Trump that it intends to strike Moscow. This is referred to as a means of deterrence, and it could force them to the negotiating table, to bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. We don't know Trump's opinion on this matter, but in an interview with Axios, Zelensky said that overall, Trump seemed to respond favorably to his proposal, that the tone of the conversation was very good. But so far, there have been no real steps indicating that the Trump administration, beyond words, is actually changing its approach to this war, unfortunately, colleague.
Thank you for this information. TSN's correspondent in the United States, Olha Koshelenko, on how America this week noticeably changed its tone toward Russia, and meanwhile, Trump was persuading Erdogan to stop negotiating with Moscow. Drones from the western direction. The president of Ukraine has instructed to verify information about drones entering our airspace from Hungary. As the head of state noted regarding the incident on the Ukrainian-Hungarian border, he was briefed by Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrski. Our military spotted reconnaissance drones, which, according to preliminary information, could have been conducting surveillance of the industrial potential in Ukrainian border areas. The incident occurred against the backdrop of deteriorating relations between Kyiv and Budapest. Just a few months ago, let me remind you, the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, for the first time in history, uncovered a military intelligence agent network in Hungary, to which Budapest responded by accusing Ukrainian diplomats of espionage. Hungary has already responded to the new statement by the President of Ukraine. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Péter Szijjártó, denied the suspicions in his social media post, stating that the President of Ukraine supposedly sees things that do not actually exist. Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha, quickly responded to the Hungarian minister's remark. He said that Ukraine sees the hypocrisy and moral degradation of the Hungarian government, both the open and covert actions against Ukraine and the rest of Europe, serving the Kremlin as a lackey, end of quote, Sybiha emphasized. And once again, drones over Europe. Another incident with drones in Denmark. On the night before Thursday, several airports in the west of the country were closed due to the intrusion of unidentified flying objects into the airspace. Billund, Denmark's second busiest airport, was shut down for an hour. Aalborg, which served both civilian and military flights, was paralyzed for almost 3 hours. Drones were also spotted in the areas of other airports and at an airbase where F-16 and F-35 fighter jets are stationed. This is already the second security incident this week. So how is Denmark responding, and the European Union and NATO as a whole? Who is being blamed for the attacks, and why are these drones still not being shot down? We'll ask TSN correspondent Natalia Fibrik about this. She's joining us live from Berlin. Hello, Natalia. Are European countries ready to defend their skies, or have the events of recent weeks forced Europe, if not to panic, then at least to grab hold of its head and take this seriously?
Sviatoslav, hello. If we talk about these rather cheap small UAVs, then it's quite fair to say that no, they are not really ready here. That is, of course, they see the drones, they detect them. However, where they came from, Where they flew to, who launched them, or what their origin is, they don't know. And these drones are not shot down due to the risk of damage, injury, or even death caused by falling debris. And until the drone is shot down and its wreckage examined, they can't say for sure what kind of UAV it is. They can only suspect Russia. Currently, the Danish government is strengthening the security of airports and other critical infrastructure. The army and police have been ordered to patrol facilities with anti-drone systems. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen addressed the nation and said that the country has become the target of hybrid warfare, warning that there could be more such attacks.
Over the top.
The past few days I have been in contact with my European colleagues. I have spoken with the Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the Prime Ministers of our neighboring countries, Sweden and Norway, as well as with the President of Finland. I have maintained a dialogue with the Secretary General of NATO, and right now we are engaged in close discussions with our alliance partners about how they can assist Denmark in this situation so that we can protect and defend our airspace.
At the same time, Danish officials are being quite cautious, stating that they do not know for certain who is behind the drone incursions. The head of Danish military intelligence refused to say whether he suspects any particular country of being involved. We do not have any evidence that would indicate a direct connection to Russia, the Danish Minister of Defense has stated. However, he did say that the drones were clearly being operated in a professional manner. And perhaps only the head of Denmark's National Security and Intelligence Service was more specific, stating that Russia's covert activities pose a threat to Denmark's security. The Russian embassy in Copenhagen, of course, rejected the accusations of Moscow's involvement in the incursion into Denmark, with the typical response of, "We are not there."
There is no doubt, and everything points to the fact that this was carried out by a professional because we're talking about such a systematic operation in many locations, almost simultaneously. This is what I would call a hybrid attack using different types of drones. As some of you know, of course, we assess the risk of Russian espionage in Denmark as high. We also assess the risk of Russian sabotage in Denmark as high. We have seen this happen in other parts of Europe. We must also expect and be prepared to see this in Denmark. Obviously, the authorities are considering these events in light of the intelligence we have.
Well, this fits into Putin's strategy. That's what they say in Germany. The defense minister said this. By the way, Boris Pistorius, the defense minister, has already reported today that drones have been spotted on German territory, specifically at the border between Germany and Denmark. Pistorius stated that Europe is experiencing hybrid attacks, and regarding Russia, he said, "We are not at war, but we are not at complete peace either."
The suspicion is obvious. This is part of Vladimir Putin's strategy. Although, as I have already said, we cannot state anything specific in this case. But this is part of what we experience every day. We are not at war, but we are not living in complete peace either. We are being attacked in a hybrid manner through disinformation campaigns and now also with the use of drones. This is the reality we face and have to deal with.
Meanwhile, NATO rejects criticism that it is responding weakly and slowly to such a situation. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte spoke about this in an interview with Bloomberg. He emphasized that the alliance is closely monitoring the war in Ukraine and is already adapting. And if there really is such a real threat, then aircraft or drones in NATO airspace will still be destroyed. However, they say that NATO is actually more prepared to defend against missiles. But with drones, the situation is indeed more complicated, because Patriot systems or modern fighter jets are still designed for large targets, and using them against small drones is like shooting sparrows with a cannon. That's why NATO wants to deploy new anti-drone technologies in the coming weeks and months. These include signal jamming, mobile anti-aircraft systems, interceptor drones, lasers, in fact, many of the technologies that Ukraine is already using, and the alliance can certainly draw on Kyiv's practical experience. And it's interesting, that there are legal restrictions, because in many countries there still aren't clear rules about who actually has the right to shoot down drones, the police or the military. And so it's entirely possible that while they're still debating whose responsibility it is, who actually has the authority to shoot it down, the drone will have already flown on. And lawmakers are only now trying to coordinate and agree on this as well. But at the same time, the alliance is still pushing for new drone defense technologies. This week, NATO conducted 2 experiments at once with new unmanned technologies. One experiment took place in Portugal, where military personnel from several countries tested aerial and underwater drones. And in the Netherlands, a very special unit of the alliance, working closely together with brilliant scientists and innovative private companies, successfully created and thoroughly tested remotely controlled boats that were meticulously 3D printed. And these exercises are conducted to test such cheap and quick solutions for how to defend and protect critical infrastructure like pipelines or cables in the North and Baltic Seas. So as we can see, this threat to European countries is described as hybrid. I would say that it is already quite real. All the more so because we see these drones flying in the dark sky with their lights on, specifically so that they can be seen. In other words, this is an open provocation. However, Europeans and NATO are only now considering how best to defend themselves. Studio?
Thank you for keeping track of all this. TSN correspondent Natalia Fibrik from Berlin on the European reaction to yet another likely Russian provocation in NATO airspace. To hear heartbeats from hundreds of kilometers away, to perform an ultrasound or to diagnose the eardrum. Due to the shortage of doctors at the front, telemedicine began to be developed. The first systems appeared at stabilization points. Military medics with broad expertise need more specialized military doctors to join the system. Such bringing specialists closer to the wounded through technology is already saving lives, reports TSN correspondent Irina Markieva, who will continue on this topic.
The road, still covered in mud, leads to a stabilization point in the northeastern direction of the front. There are only a few kilometers to the Russian border from here. Burned-out cars line the roadside, drones are flying overhead, and evacuating along these routes is dangerous. This team must provide assistance under any circumstances. The commander of the medical company of the 101st Territorial Defense Brigade, Mikhailo Hanali, is a trauma surgeon by profession, but he often needs quick consultations with colleagues so that they can see the injuries, wounds, and changes, something like a medical council.
Now I want to launch it.
Mr. Mikhailo is launching a diagnostic telemedicine complex that recently appeared at the stabilization point. It is simultaneously a 12-channel cardiograph, a portable ultrasound device, an electronic stethoscope, and a dermatoscope with a camera. All these indicators can be seen by his colleagues in real time. From this stabilization point, which is 10 kilometers from the front line, you can connect with any military specialist in Ukraine and get a decision on what to do next. 2 soldiers with concussions are brought to the stabilization point. Disorientation, nausea, loss of hearing.
Mr.
Mikhailo checks the injuries using a tascoper. I have
superficial knowledge specifically from the perspective of ENT practice. There is some, but it's not complete. Accordingly, I take into account that I can connect with a specialist and we just show him the image and he can say, show me this, show me that.
Hundreds of kilometers away from the stabilization point, an otolaryngologist can see the image from the otoscope. Together, they determine the extent of damage to the eardrums. ENT specialist Talis Vitlishny says that this image is quite sufficient to make a preliminary diagnosis and help his colleague at the stabilization point start treatment.
You can insert the otoscope into an ear somewhere in Sumy region or in Donetsk and transmit the image to the ENT doctor. That's already a good thing. For acoustic trauma, it's important to start proper treatment within the first 24 hours. And indeed, modern telemedicine technology makes it entirely possible to effectively conduct these essential medical consultations and services remotely from virtually any location.
With a stethoscope at a distance, other specialists can listen to heart murmurs and arrhythmias, interpret cardiograms, or detect internal bleeding thanks to a portable ultrasound device.
We look, for example, to see if there is any damage to the spleen or accumulation of blood in the angle between the kidney and the spleen. We checked, and yes, thank God it's clear here. If we see free fluid here somewhere, it means the person has been injured and there is internal bleeding.
All these procedures can be performed not only by a doctor, but even by a paramedic under the remote supervision of a doctor. This makes it possible to decide on the urgency of evacuation. If there is no internal bleeding, you can safely wait for a relatively safe window or take the risk.
If we detect internal bleeding that requires a specialized operation, then the appropriate evacuation is called in and the necessary cover is used to suppress the activity of enemy drones. This includes anti-drone rifles, shotguns and similar means to ensure the urgent evacuation of the wounded personnel.
And there are quite a few situations like this where help is needed even in such a state. Thanks to these connections between frontline medics and military specialists at specialized medical facilities, Mr. Alexander's eyesight was saved.
I distinctly remember that they absolutely had to lead me by the hand, even when we were outside.
A person just went blind in an instant. His chief medical officer also contacted me in the same way. The diagnosis was made remotely.
After the concussion, he went blind and no one on site could figure out the cause. Ophthalmologist Oleksiy Sirik from the Chernihiv Military Hospital identified the problem remotely. Traumatic cataract in both eyes.
Essentially, due to the strong impact, the lens became clouded.
Thanks to the fact that the diagnosis was made remotely and quickly, Mr. Alexander was immediately evacuated to the hospital.
We operated on him. This morning he already shaved. A good result. The lens is in place. We inserted it into the capsule.
Now he's awaiting lens replacement in his left eye as well. But already today he is moving around without assistance and has picked up his phone. Telemedicine helps to establish a diagnosis more quickly, transport the patient to a facility where specialized care can be provided, and allows hospital doctors to prepare and set up the operating room, already having the diagnosis and preliminary findings.
I can explain in a proper manner how to prepare the eye so that we can safely and effectively ensure it can at a later time be operated on for the surgical procedure.
These telemedicine systems were first put to use by the 106th Territorial Defense Brigade. Currently, there are already 7 of them in its support points and medical companies.
First and foremost, it helps us address the shortage of qualified personnel. In places where there is no doctor but one is needed and it's impossible to bring one in right away, you can consult with a doctor in this way.
The system, made by a French manufacturer, cost almost 1 million hryvnias. It runs on mains power, and in autonomous mode it works for about 10 hours. All that's needed for the connection is any secure internet between the medics close to the front line and the highly qualified specialists. The first medical system was connected by doctors from the Chernihiv military hospital. This way you can consult remotely with ophthalmologists, dermatologists, ENT specialists, surgeons, traumatologists, anesthesiologists, and other highly qualified specialists who are so lacking in military medicine. For example, here a hospital dermatologist is consulting with soldiers at a deployment site.
It has slightly increased in overall size.
The soldiers admit it. A routine checkup would take a lot of time and they simply don't have the opportunity. Traveling to another region, sitting in line, waiting for an appointment.
At the very least, it saves 2 days going to the hospital, getting examined.
The dermatoscope with a camera transmits the image to the doctor's monitor. 3 of the soldiers are fine, but one has an atypical papilloma, so the dermatologist immediately referred him to an oncologist.
It's really focusing now. That was a much better shot indeed.
The telemedicine system on the front line is just beginning to be developed. Doctors are already using it. They say all the necessary equipment is available. The main thing is for other units to understand its importance and effectiveness. These systems have been adopted and the appropriate decisions have been made locally.
In the future, I really hope there will be certain groups of doctors who can be connected there. The consultant themselves doesn't need to have such a setup. It's enough to have a smartphone, tablet or computer. If our experience with its use is positive, it will be expanded. It will be possible to use it in both linear and vertical communication chains.
For medics on the front line, it's important that colleagues from both civilian and military medical centers join in. This is one way to address the shortage of doctors in the military and effectively save the lives of defenders. Irina Markovic, Alexander Shayan, TSN 1, Clisodin Marathon, Unified News.